Hey, do you think that there's any injustice in the world, present or past? If you're like a normal person, your answer is going to be yeah, of course. There's tons of injustice. Just to make this vivid, why don't you pause this video and make a list of injustices, past and present. All right, you got your jury list. Next question. What makes those injustices unjust? You might think, well, it's just obvious that they're unjust, but why are they unjust? What makes that unjust? This is an abstract question. Sometimes people don't think about it, but it can be useful. If you answer this question, you are developing a theory of justice. A theory of justice tries to explain what the sort of essence of justice is, what makes things just and unjust. And in particular, like what makes like laws and policies and governments just and unjust. So one of the most famous theories of justice comes from a philosopher named John Rawls. And he was a 20th century philosopher at Harvard, a real famous guy, and he's got a famous book called The Theory of Justice. Super famous book. Almost anything written about justice is going to mention this book because it was so influential. And here's the basic idea. Think about the various injustices you thought of a moment ago. You could ask, like, well, why do they happen? Here is a surprisingly obvious answer. These injustices happen because people know who they are. This is super obvious, but it's super important. If you know who you are, and if you know whether you're part of sort of a dominant group or not, you know whether you can rig the system in your own favor. So why were there laws that allowed slavery? Why were there laws that prevented women from voting? Well, basically because the people who were making the laws thought like, well, we're not going to be affected negatively by those laws. Let's go for it. It's not going to harm us. Might even benefit us. Well, in the slavery, it will benefit us in various ways, but it's not going to affect us badly. How's that? Well, we know who we are, and we know that we are not among the people who will be enslaved, and we know that we're not among the people, women, who aren't going to be allowed to vote. So why does injustice happen? Well, in part because people know who they are, and they know that they can rig up the system to benefit themselves at the expense of others. So this knowledge is like an important element of injustice. You know that you have advantages that you can use to exploit others with. So here's Rawls' theory of justice. Rawls' theory of justice is that justice is what you would agree to if you didn't know who you were. If you don't know who you are, then you can't like sort of rig the system in your favor. Now, this is like a theory. It's an explanation. It's not necessarily meant to be super practical. But basically the idea is, all right, what is just is what people would agree to if they didn't know who they were. So, would people agree to enslaving some people, some race of people, if they didn't know who they were? No. To think about this, you put yourself behind what's called the veil of ignorance. Behind the veil of ignorance, you don't know like your race, your sex, whether you're smart, whether you're rich, whether you're poor. You don't have any information that you can use to make a biased, self-serving decision in that sort of way. So, again, we're going to consider, should we have slavery or not? Well, I don't know who I am. And I know whoever I am in real life, sort of when you take me from behind the veil or put me in front of the veil of ignorance, when the veil of ignorance is removed, I don't know who I am. And I know that I don't want to be enslaved, so I wouldn't agree to that if I didn't know who I was. Somebody proposes, well, we're not gonna let's not have women, let's not allow women to have various types of jobs that we allow men to have, just because they're women. Well, could you agree to this sort of policy if you didn't know your sex or gender? Well, if you were a woman, you wouldn't agree to that. It would be unfair. So John Rawls' theory of justice is conceives of justice as fairness. And what's fair is what you would agree to behind the veil of ignorance if you didn't know who you were. So you could think about various injustices and think about, well, would people agree to these things being done if they didn't know who they were? In many cases, no. I mean, go back to your list. Would, if this group's doing that to the other group, would they agree to that being done if they didn't know who they were? No. So this is a pretty good idea. All right, a couple advanced things. Some people have argued, philosopher Mark Rowlands and others have argued that this idea could be extended to animals. Suppose somebody, so basically like, would you agree to this being done if you didn't know your species? This might seem kind of silly to some, but it's actually just kind of like putting yourself in the shoes of others. You know, suppose somebody's tormenting a cat or a dog. Would you like that done to you? Well, the idea seems to be like, look, you can imagine things from their point of view, and you wouldn't agree to that being done if you had their point of view. So this theory can arguably be extended to animals. People have done that. Can it be extended to embryos? I don't really think so. I don't think that you can sort of consider the perspective of an embryo, because embryos just don't have perspectives. It's not like you can sort of like imagine yourself as an embryo. That's like incoherent. It's like imagine yourself as something that can't imagine anything. I don't think you can do it. All right, two more little advanced things. So Rawls proposes this. What kind of society would you agree to behind the veil of ignorance? He thinks your initial answer is equality. You would want things to be equal for everybody. He then has a next step where he says, like, well, actually, people would be okay with some people being better off, provided if they are better off, nobody else is worse off for it. And kind of ideally, if the others benefit for it. But the idea is initially equality, because, you know, you wouldn't want to be worse off than anybody else. You know, would you agree to this situation where, you know, 99 out of 100 people are doing well, but one of them's doing absolutely terrible? No, you wouldn't want that. You wouldn't agree to that. So you'd want equality, but he thinks that you could go beyond that if the differences benefit, at least don't harm others and perhaps benefit others. So that's called the difference principle. All right, this has been a rather long video. Rawls' book is very long, very complicated. There's an article at 1,000-Word Philosophy that sort of sums up some of this. And this, of course, is a simplification of things. But the basic idea is if you wouldn't agree to something being done if you didn't know who you were, it would be unjust and wrong. All right, I hope this helps.